Welcome in, everybody, to the first and long college football show. We just watched some amazing college football playoff games. I hope that everybody enjoyed that and had a happy new year. Mason, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing good. We had some great football to watch, and man, it was everything it was cracked up to be, and then some. Two one-score games. One of them goes to overtime. One of them, is ended on the what could have been a game-winning drive. Right. Um, it was just really fun to watch. Didn't have a dog in the fight, but man, it was really an outstanding couple of playoff semifinal games.
Yeah, this was some of the best semifinal games that we've seen. The average margin of victory in these things was pretty high those first few years whenever the 14 playoffs started. And this is the first year, I think, or at least that I can think of, that all four teams were really close to, being able to win a playoff game. We've seen years where we've had Cincinnati in there, didn't have a prayer. We've seen Washington back in what was it, 16, didn't
Yeah.
have a prayer. We've just seen some serious blowouts. The LSU run to the national championship, we saw some blowouts. So it was definitely a breath of fresh air and a welcomed set of really good games. And we're going to dive into those today. We're going to talk about some takeaways from those games. Obviously, talk about the winners and losers of those. We're going to talk about some of these other bowl games that we had, just some takeaways from it. And we'll just kind of jump into a little bit of our I guess just first thoughts on the national championship matchup that we're going to have taking place in Houston. Thank you all so much for joining us. And if you're new to the First and Long College Football Show, welcome. Please hit the subscribe button and come hang out with us. We're going to do this all season, including the off season. Yeah, I say off season. There is no off season in college football anymore. So if you're wanting to stay plugged in and know what's going on, First and Long College Football Show is the way to go. Let's jump into this thing, man. The Rose Bowl. We'll get into that one first. This was Michigan was the 2-point favorite in this one, and lots of people I talked to just could not understand why Michigan was favored in this game. And we saw it. There was a lot of people that said, "Well, I just think the Big Ten's just not that good this year." I don't know about the competition that they've played. They played a weak schedule, and this is true. This is very true. But Alabama tried to tell us who they were several times this year, and it's hard. It's hard to predict against a Nick Saban Crimson Tide team. I mean, they had a huge coaching advantage. They have a coaching advantage and talent advantage in every game they play. So I think it was hard for people to wrap their head around that. But Michigan they had the better playmakers in this game. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to. You had, for Alabama, Jermaine Burton had 4 receptions for 21 yards. For your bell ringer wide receiver, that's not going to work in a game like this. Alabama actually buttered their bread on the ground in this one, and were pretty successful running the football, but they needed that extra element, that playmaking element through the air, to be able to move the ball effectively and put points on the board against this really, really, really stout Michigan defense. What did you think about the game?
Well, it was a great game. I obviously had Alabama winning the game. I had them picked to win just because of the Jimmies and Joes on the field. And also, I had concerns about McCarthy's ability to pass the ball more than 20 times in a game because we haven't had to see that. And he was able to do it pretty successfully. I mean, he didn't have a perfect game by any stretch, but he did what he needed to do. Didn't turn the ball over. Thought he did on that first pass that he had, but
Yeah.
and I thought, man, uh-oh, we're in for a routing, in that first play, first pass at least for McCarthy. But he ends up 17 to 27 for 221 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. A fine day, by his standards and by Michigan standards. And look, my concern was pretty valid that Michigan hasn't had to do this. So can they do it? Right. And they proved that they can, that they had a little bit extra in the tank that they had been holding out on, and they had it ready to go when they needed it, and that's exactly what happened. Blake Corum looked great against a tough rushing defense. I thought that he played pretty well, averaged 4.4 yards per carry. That's plenty good in a game like this, right? That's not a great season average, but in a heavyweight matchup like this, that's pretty dang good. You'll
Mm-hmm.
take that, and including the game winning catch there at the end. So what a great game! I thought Roman Wilson played really well, especially in that second half. We saw him kind of come to life, and just a pretty complete game for Michigan, given the special teams issues that they had. I thought that they had a really good game. Um, Obviously, the special teams. I mean, I don't know how you give them anything less than a D or anything greater than a D. Kind of score
Yeah.
here for the special teams. I thought they were pretty bad. There were three punts that they attempted to field within the 10-yard line, or they did field within the 10-yard line, and it just seemed like they just could not figure out the punt return thing, and I don't know what the deal was there. But they were able to kind of persevere that and get through that. Also, the 1 point for the extra point that they botched, and could have ended up costing them the game if Alabama comes out with this thing in overtime. So they definitely had some head scratching moments in special teams, but the defense did a great job and gave the offense an opportunity to win the ball game, and they did just that. On the Alabama side, I thought that Alabama, they had the issues with this in the snapping game, right? And a couple back
All
to back
year.
there. They have all year, and it kind of reared its ugly head. They kind of went away from that in the SEC championship game. Um, they also did a better job of protecting Jalen Milroe in that game than they had all year, and they didn't do such a good job of that last night. So
Mm-mm.
we kind of saw the typical Alabama team from or typical in a sense of this season and what we've seen kind of come back out, and they had been making some progress the past few weeks. Looked great, had obviously their best game against Georgia, and kind of regress back to the mean there a little bit, and who they were in this game. I thought so. Given that, I thought it was a pretty average performance by Bama, and they needed to be well above average in this game, and that's kind
Yeah,
of what happened. I thought that Michigan, I think Michigan's a better team, first of all, and
definitely.
really this game could have gotten a little bit more out of hand had they not had the special teams issues. But it was a competitive game, a fun game to watch, and I think the better team won, and I think that's an important takeaway.
Yeah, and like I said, man, I think a lot of people just kind of get blinded by the Bama thing, but I mean, JJ McCarthy played way better than Jalen Milroe.
Hmm.
Like, and not even close. I mean, Milroe 16 of 23, 116 yards, averaged 2.3 yards per pass. I mean, that is horrible. And you're not going to win a playoff game like that. And this Alabama running attack was never good enough to fill that gap. It was going to take a 300-yard rushing day on the ground to fill that gap. And as you said, Michigan tried to hand them the ball several times. A lot of fumbles in this game. The ball ended up on the ground a bunch, but only a couple of them ended up being turnovers. And then the special teams thing was very surprising to me. I thought that was a clear advantage for Michigan in this game. And I was thinking, man, this game's going to be about who makes the mistakes. Well, it wasn't necessarily the case. I think Michigan did a good job covering up their mistakes by playing really, really solid defense in this game. But again, 116 yards through the air is not going to get it against this Michigan team. You're not going to be able to just bludgeon them on the ground. That was never going to happen. Um, where does Alabama go from here? Do you think Milroe is a legitimate, like, top tier SEC quarterback? Do you think that?
I think he could be if he had Georgia's offensive line and protection. I think you'd see a much better version of him. I think that he's having to.
No, your mic cut out there, but I'll kind of fill in the gap there while you get that figured out. But here's kind of my take on it, and I was setting you up for the question there, but I think that his passing game, he has all of the ability to be a good top tier passer, but it's not anywhere close to a polished product. And I don't know, man. I'm starting to wonder. I'm really starting to wonder. We know his ability to run is elite, and we understand that. But you can't be a one trick pony. You can't be. He's not really a dual threat quarterback in the sense that
Mhm.
he's really only good at running. He can throw the long ball, and that's helpful sometimes, but his short to intermediate game is kind of a mess. And you're right, the Alabama offensive line. Look, they allowed let's see, 6 sacks in this game on
Mhm.
him, and against Georgia, Georgia sacked him 4 or 5 times.
Yeah,
So you you're talking about um, like over 50 sacks given up for the year. That is not what we're accustomed to seeing with an Alabama team, and we're not going to see a successful Alabama team when they're giving up that kind of sacks.
that's right.
I don't think so. Definitely got to go back to the drawing board. I said it all year. I think this was one of the best coaching jobs by Nick Saban in his career
Mhm.
because I think this is one of the worst teams that he's had that he's made a run with. Anyway,
It's
um,
it's funny because, from a recruiting perspective, it's the best team he's ever had, right? As far as like a blue chip ratio, it's the best, most talented team he's ever had. But then when they get on the field, they don't have you can clearly tell they don't have the amount of first round talent that they've had in the past, even though the recruiting rankings would say otherwise.
yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that, Mason, is in part due to the fact that he doesn't have as good of coaches around him as what he's had in the past. And as great as Nick Saban is, he's the greatest of all time. There is zero doubt about that. But his greatest teams, he's had some amazing coaches alongside of him. I mean, Kirby Smart being one of them, won multiple championships with him. Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian. That's what's missing for this Alabama team at this point. There is none of that. And, you know, I didn't even know this, but the offensive coordinator for Washington, I forget his name. It's a Krenikowski it's a
Mhm.
weird last name or whatever. Um, Nick Saban tried to hire him
Yeah,
last year before he hired Tommy Rees, and he turned him down. He
yeah.
turned Nick Saban down and said, I've got a chance to win one here in Washington. And lo and behold, here's Washington going to the national championship. But that kind of just further proves the point that these are not, and we all know that Alabama wanted Jeremy Pruitt at defensive coordinator. But then there was a show cause slapped on him, and it was not going to happen. So they ended up going and getting Kevin Steele. So I think that there needs to be coordinator changes, but I don't know that there was enough. Um, I don't know that there was enough displeasure among Alabama, boosters and things like that to make anything like that happen. Do you think Alabama's going to make changes like that?
I don't think that they will at the coordinator position. My understanding is that they've been plenty happy lately with the coordinator hires and the play calls and things like that. But my concern, kind of going back to what we were talking about, is the development aspect, and that typically comes from the other on-field coaches, the position coaches, and if you can find a offensive coordinator like the coordinator at Washington who can do both, call plays and can develop,
Hmm.
then you've really got something. That's how Todd Monken was at Georgia. He was a
Hmm.
great developer, not a great recruiter, but he could develop wide receivers and quarterbacks really well. Um, so I think that that's where you kind of have to look at, and you know Nick Saban in Alabama in, I think it was 2018. Before they won their championship in 2018, they kind of went to a model of hiring coaches that can get the job done on the field, right? And play callers more so than developers and recruiters. They said, "Hey, look, we've got the pieces, but we got to go out and win, on the field." And they had a philosophy change from a recruiting philosophy to, hey, we've got the talent. Let's go play with what we've got, and get a little bit sharper in that sense. And I don't think that they've ever come off of that. And the recruiting machine is doing what it's supposed to do, but I think that there's a lack of development, and I think that that's probably as easy as we could put it.
Yeah. Well, we're going on. It's 2024, and Alabama hasn't won a title since 2020, and a lot of people don't really count that. That there was teams that played 6 games that year, 4 games that year. I mean, it was a great team. Don't get me wrong; it was a great
Yeah.
team and everything. But it's been a while since we've seen this Alabama team win a championship, and there's
Yeah.
obviously something missing.
I
And
mean, that team though in 2020, I'll just go ahead and tell you, they would have beat Georgia in 2021. That was a really good team in 2020, and I don't think anybody can take anything away from them. That was a heck of a team. It would have been a good game. I think that's what a lot of people would have wanted to see, but I don't want to take anything away from 2020 Bama. But outside of that, it's been since 2017. Since they've won, and the first time in Nick Saban's career that he's gone 3 seasons without winning a national championship.
Yeah.
At Alabama.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was an odd year. Definitely a great team, specifically a really good offense. But it's been a while, and I'm starting to wonder. I'm thinking this might be it. It's going to be hard for them to win one next year, I feel like, but we will definitely be keeping our eye on that as the SEC schedule is completely changing, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And Alabama is going to be a big part of some big matchups next year. But Alabama 20, Michigan 27. Michigan holds on in overtime. Congratulations to the Wolverines. That was an outstanding Rose Bowl, probably the second best Rose Bowl that I can think of, behind Georgia and Oklahoma, which was an absolute thriller back in 2017. Let's move on to our Sugar Bowl that we had last night. And, man, this one did not disappoint. Plenty of offense to be had. But, man, Michael Penix and those Washington Huskies were on a mission, dude. I had several notes from this game. And, look, Washington gets the credit. Their defense played really well, I thought, for the most part. Washington set up Texas with a short field at one point, spotted them a touchdown, basically. But Texas had way too many penalties. They had just a ton of penalties in this game, and I'll pull up the total number, but I know there was like 6 offensive penalties in the first half for Texas. Not going to get it, and it was a lot of like moving around at the line and false starts and things like that. It was just this Texas team was never in a rhythm, it felt like, and they were running the ball really well, and every time they ran the ball really well, they started trying to throw the ball, and I just couldn't figure out why they couldn't stick to the run game a little bit more in that one. But look, Jaden Blue had a nice game. A.D. Mitchell finally yells at the coaches enough to and tells them to give him the ball, and he does score after that. So there was some good things there for Texas, but that first half just killed them, man. What was your thoughts about Texas in this one?
Yeah, with Texas, I agree. They were averaging between Baxter and Blue close to 7 yards per carry. I mean, 6.8.5 yards per carry, I think, is probably about where it's at. So if that's the case, why aren't they running it more? And I heard in the broadcast they were saying that Sarkisian had like 30 scripted like third down, third and short plays or something like that. It's just a very scripted sort of game plan. And sometimes I wonder if that's the best route to go, because I mean, are you really getting a good feel for the game if that's kind of how you're planning things out? Seems like, I'm no play caller, but it seems like you could be a little bit too prepared in some of those cases, and you kind of miss on sort of the feeling of the game and how that goes. So maybe that had a little bit of something to do with it. I'm no expert in that category for sure, but ultimately I thought that Quinn Ewers played kind of below average in a lot of ways. He too was missing a lot of the intermediate throws. It just seemed like this offense was not the same offense we saw against Oklahoma State, and I thought that we would have seen a lot more firepower coming from them against a Washington defense that is a lot better than people think. When you look at Washington and all the points that they gave up earlier in the year, a lot of that came when a few of their secondary players were out. And on the back end, they really weren't doing a good job in protection. And in this game, I thought they did a great job of protection against arguably their toughest opponents as far as their skill position players. So I just think you have to credit Washington a ton defensively and offensively. I just out of all the four teams that were in the playoffs, I thought that Washington played the best game, overall. Texas offensively on the O line, I thought that they did a pretty good job, but it seemed like Washington was getting some pressure on, getting some pressure on Quinn Ewers. And let's see, they ended up only with 2 sacks, but it sure seemed like they were in the backfield wreaking havoc a lot more than that. Up until like the last 2 drives, we didn't see Texas responding to that very well until their backs were up against the wall. Had they played like that all game, they probably win the game. But you always have a different game plan once you get punched in the mouth, right?
Yeah. Well, as I said, the penalties were a big hit for Texas as well. 10 penalties in this game. Anytime you're getting into double-digit penalties, you're affecting your game plan a lot. And maybe you're right with the whole scripted drives thing. I'm not sure. That it definitely something seemed off, and the rhythm was not there. And I feel like if you were to script a bunch of plays or whatnot, you're not really going with the flow of the game necessarily. Right. You're going with some kind of recipe, and you're not just kind of letting the chef do his work in the kitchen. And so that was definitely interesting to watch. But kind of moving over to the Washington side of things, first of all, congratulations to all the Washington fans, because what an amazing season it has been. 10 games in a row now, Washington has won by a single score or less. That is a record among bowl teams. Has never been done before in the bowl era. That's just unbelievable. And they're just a flat out good football team, man. They're just a flat out good football team. These wide receivers are all time. This is probably my favorite group of wide receivers that are on one team together in college football, I think, that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's remarkable. And it's raw talent and speed and ability and all that stuff, but it's Kalen DeBoer that's pulling the strings, man. And this guy is so good at getting your defense on the field in a package that he wants to go against. He won't let you off the field, right? And then he'll isolate Rome Odunze or McMillan or Polk, whoever, whatever flavor he's feeling. And they're going to put you on an island out there, and you better be able to cover them. And we said before this game, part of the reason that we didn't like this matchup for Texas was that secondary. And boy, howdy, did they get torched. And you know what? They were in position, though, a lot. I mean, they really were. And it was just, catches that were just dropping out of the sky, just out of nowhere into the breadbasket. There was nothing they could do. Yeah. There was absolutely nothing they could do. Michael Penix was a man on a mission. He has been really ever since that middle part of the year. He had, I think it was injury stuff is what it was. He kind of had some issues there in the middle of the year with efficiency and things like that. Boy, he looks healthy. We saw his legs help them out in several times in this game, and it was much needed to aid their rushing game. Washington was not able to run the football in this game, and now it looks like they're going to be down Dylan Johnson for the national championship game, which I'm sure we'll get into later this week. And that caused a whole ripple effect of shit at the end of that game too, because Dylan Johnson, there's like 50 seconds left in this game or whatever it is. Dylan Johnson goes down, and the clock is supposed to be running. But the clock has to stop for Washington's own injury timeout.
Yeah.
And so now you're in a position where you can't run the clock the way you need to and have to give the ball back to Texas. And that just caused a whole, just the end of that game was tense, amazingly tense. Excuse me, not Florida. Texas went on down the field and damn near scored. And it was, I know, a tight bunghole situation for all the Washington fans, because I was on the edge of my seat as well, mainly like this.
Yeah.
Like, I could barely watch. But again, Washington undefeated, 14-0, going to play the Michigan Wolverines. Holy cow, man. What a season for Washington. What did you think about the Huskies in this one?
I like I said, I mean, I thought that they played an outstanding game overall. Michael Penix had 430 yards in this game, and I think people are seriously questioning whether or not they should have selected him on their Heisman ballot after this game, and it further proves the point that I've always made, that we should wait until the end of the entire season to deem a Heisman. Yeah. Like, how do you have a true Heisman if you don't include the best games? And moving into next year, you're talking 4 games that you might miss of one player, if you do the Heisman in just the regular season. So that I think needs to change starting next year. And this is a great example. Nobody, I don't think, would in their right mind would have selected Jaden Daniels over Michael Penix after that performance, because that was just outstanding against great talent. Yeah. Very talented.
Meanwhile, Jaden Daniels is sitting out of his bowl game.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? How is that fair, man? You're absolutely right.
And you if you do that, you help solve at least a couple of your better players in college football. You help solve the problem of them opting out when they're not in the playoff, right? Because they're going to want to win the Heisman, so they would play, right, to get that opportunity. Anyways, that's a different topic. It sounds like a good summer topic for us.
Hey, and I tell you what else would make them want to play for that Heisman, and give them a $500,000 cash prize with it, and you'll see some people really competing for it.
That's right. But going back to Washington, one of the biggest head scratching moments to me was continuing to run Dylan Johnson. I think Rodgers was doing a pretty fine job, actually averaged more yards per carry than Johnson, and now you're going into a national championship and you're without him, probably. Yeah. I mean, with the way he went down at the end, I just, you knew he was hurt in the first half. You could tell he was hurt. I just didn't feel like it was necessary to keep him out there, especially on that last drive, right, where you're running him not to get a first down, but to keep the clock running. So why not give it to the backup? It didn't make any sense to me. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if maybe I'm missing something, but it seemed like there was no reason for him to be carrying the ball 21 times in this game, when he really wasn't even that effective. He carried the ball 21 times for 49 yards, did have 2 touchdowns, but the injury came after those 2 touchdowns, and there were signs of it earlier on. I was kind of shocked. I mean, I was shocked that initially that they kept him in, but then when he actually got like seriously hurt, that's when I was kind of like, man, this is going to come back to bite him, because I do think that they need him next week.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that national championship game just a little bit today, and we'll break it down fully later this week with all the stats and stuff. But I agree with you. This is a damning blow, because this is a big part of this offense, and this Washington run game is not efficient. Okay.
Right.
It hasn't really been that efficient all year. They've had a few games here and there, and look, their best offensive games have been whenever they've ran the ball effectively.
And in particular, lately. They had gotten better running the ball lately.
They did. At the end of the season, they got a lot better at it. Yeah. Their big thing is they got to hit triple digits in rushing yards a game. And it just totally sets up everything else. As much as they throw the ball, they still run to set up the pass. It's an interesting system that they've got there, but it's just part of their repertoire, and the more effective they are running it, the more effective that offense is, and all they need is just a little spark out of the run game. So I think you're right. I mean, I don't understand what the point was. I think he was just trying to be a Warrior,
Mhm.
and they were saying that they couldn't keep him off the field, and he had added like a nagging foot injury or whatever, but it was crazy. Everybody kept grabbing that foot. Boy, when you get hurt out there, and everybody knows on the field what's hurt, because every time he got tackled, everybody's like grabbing his foot. Like they're just doing everything they can to aggravate that thing, and that's, hey man, you get any edge you can out there. It's war. So no hate or nothing on that, but this was a amazing performance by the offense and the defense. We don't talk about the Washington defense enough, but this defense just got healthy. The secondary, the back end of the secondary, people don't realize all the stats that you want to look up on them for the season. They're kind of in vain defensively because they haven't been healthy. I mean, the whole the 8 or 9 middle games of their schedule, they were not healthy.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden, right here at the end, and that's playoff ball is different, and that's what's so different about it. It's about who's getting hot at the right time, who's got the right path to the playoff, and which is going to come into play more when we have more teams, and who gets healthy at the right time. And
Yeah.
Washington was getting healthy at the end of the season, and then they got a 30-day break there, and it just seemed like it was what the doctor ordered for them. But hey, Washington wins 37-31. It was a nail biter right there at the end, but in both of these playoff games, we had defenses step up and win the game for their team. Any final thoughts on this one?
Well, I want to also bring home the point that Texas got outcoached. Steve Sarkisian got outcoached by Kalen DeBoer. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that this guy gets enough credit for what he's done. I mean, overall record, it's like 130 something and 11. If I'm 136 and 11, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Absolutely incredible job. You mentioned the 30 days that you get in between the conference championship and that semifinal game, and um, you can coach up a team in 30 days and in 15 extra practices. And I think that they did a better job of preparing for this game than Texas did. A lot more sort of to play for. They were the underdogs all season long. And I think that, not enough can be said about the job that Kalen DeBoer's done, and the whole coaching staff has done with this Huskies team.
yeah. Well, a name that you need to know is Ryan Grubb, and that's the offensive coordinator for Washington. We talked about him a little bit earlier in the episode. This was a guy that Alabama was trying to hire as their offensive coordinator last year, before they hired Tommy Rees. And you're talking about a guy who not very long ago was pouring concrete, living in his sister's laundry room. I mean, and if that don't tug on your heartstrings, I don't know what will. Now he's making $2 million a year, and he's going to be one of the most sought after offensive minds in the game after this. They already is. It doesn't matter what happens in the next game. Um, he turned down Nick Saban and Alabama to stay at Washington because he felt like Washington was building something special. DeBoer has lost 2 games since he's been there. Um, they've got something going, obviously, and the offensive coordinator, Coach Grubb, there is just a fantastic story, and just one of the many storylines on this Washington team that makes them just a kind of like a Cinderella story in a way. I guess they are technically the outsiders, aren't they?
Hmm.
So, and if you guys didn't check that out, go check out our hype video. We put up a hype video. Okay, it's called "The Outsiders," and it's the Washington Huskies playoff hype video. However you want to, put that. It'll make you run through a brick wall. So if you haven't checked that out, I suggest that you do so and give us a like on that. We can't make any money on anything like that. We just doing it for fun. And we loved watching Washington this year. And congratulations again. It's been a lot of fun. You want to go through some of these bowl games, man? Just
Yeah,
kind
let's
of
do it.
talk about these other ones. I'll put a few of them up on the screen here, and we'll just kind of go through them in order here, and uh, we'll just kind of talk about each of these fan bases because, look, I mean, Whenever all this is said and done, I want to sit down and this will be some off-season material that we'll talk about. But what bowl games are going to project a team in the right direction? Because everybody can say what they want to say, but these bowl games still mean something. They do, and they mean something. In First of all, you get extra practices, like you talked about. 15 extra bowl practices is a big deal, especially whenever you're bringing in freshmen,
Yeah.
right? That are coming from the high school ranks. They can come and participate in practice, not the bowl game, but they get to be with the team and get a feel for things. So it helps your team get ready for the next year in that sense. And I mean, like a team like Georgia or like Missouri here, winning that bowl game is like giving yourself some momentum going into that next season, isn't it? I mean, we saw it with Oregon State. Remember Oregon State, not this past bowl season, but the bowl season before. They won like their last like 6 or 7 games, beat the ever living stew out of the Florida Gators in a bowl game. And then lo and behold, guess what? They hung around in the top 10, top 15 all year this year. Like, and everybody was talking about them every chance they got. So in this Cotton Bowl, we'll start with it. Missouri ends up winning 14-3. This was this game was slow going. Okay,
Yeah.
at first the offensive lines were shitty in this one. I mean, just couldn't keep the defenses off the quarterbacks. Ohio State was really excited to see Devin Brown after McCord had hit the road. He's headed to Syracuse to play for Fran Brown. And then all of a sudden, said offensive line just olays some defensive players, and Devin Brown just gets smacked, and he's hurt, and he doesn't come back in. I think he actually did come back in, but he couldn't go, and so I can't even remember the freshman's name, but it was a true freshman quarterback that they had brought in. I think he is on scholarship,
Yeah. Klein
but
Holtz.
yeah, that uh, didn't look good, and it was a tough spot. I mean, God, how many reps do you think that kid got getting ready for that game? I mean,
Oof.
I don't think it was many, dude, because they're
Yeah.
concentrating on getting Devin Brown ready,
Yeah.
who hadn't been getting the starting reps. So, did you have any takeaways from this one? And um, I mean, Missouri's a good ball club, huh?
Yeah. I picked Missouri to win this game anyways. I believe. Gosh, this was one
We
I was
kind of
pretty.
changed our mind because when we
Yeah.
did this breakdown, we both were on Missouri. And
Yeah.
then we did the breakdown and we were like, oh shit, nobody's sitting out for Ohio
Yeah.
State like we thought. But as it turned out, Marvin Harrison didn't play, McCord didn't play, who obviously Julian Fleming didn't play. He was transferred out. And there was a couple other ones too that didn't play because of either injury or opt out. So yeah, we kind of changed our mind. We were like, damn, we feel pretty good about Ohio State now that we've done this breakdown. We fooled ourselves. Your mic is muted there. But again, this was a dismal
Sorry.
offensive performance for Ohio State. And I know that was extenuating circumstances. That's, you never want your freshman quarterback coming in and playing a bowl game with little to no reps. Okay. That was obviously not good. But for Missouri, this is I think their first 11 win season ever. The Tigers are on a roll, and they've got a really good recruiting class coming in. I thought they were more senior laden than what they actually are. I thought they were losing more players this offseason, guys graduating out and things like that. But apparently, a lot of that team's going to be back. What were your thoughts on the Tigers?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that they played pretty well. Cody Schrader to me kind of started slow, and I'm wondering if he's going to get going ever. He finally does, and ends up with 128 yards and a touchdown. Luther Burden was another one who you didn't see much of. Had 4 total touches in this game, but he does end up getting a touchdown, a very important touchdown late. So your two big key playmakers end up getting the 2 touchdowns that you need in the fourth quarter to win it. But credit Ohio State's defense. I thought that they played about as good as you can. This is a tough team. Missouri is, and if you told me that Ohio State held them to 14, I'm assuming that they won by 14. But that wasn't the case. I think that we saw Ohio State stutter a bit more than we thought that they would. A lot of that is in part to Devin Brown going out with the injury. I think that had he played in this game, it probably would have been more competitive. Ohio State might have even been able to win this game. Not that he was lighting the world on fire before he went out, but he was kind of just getting his feet wet, and ended up, he was 4 for 6, and and I thought that he he obviously put them in a better situation to win the ball game than Keinholz did.
Yeah.
And now I think that you've got to wonder what Ohio State's going to do with the transfer portal moving forward at
That's
quarterback.
exactly what I was about to ask. They
Um,
got to get a quarterback, right?
I would think, they had,
Ryan Day says no, but I don't know, bud.
I think that Ryan Day is trying to make sure that he doesn't have another quarterback enter the transfer portal. Um, maybe Kyle McCord doesn't look too bad at this point, and
Mm-hmm.
but overall, like you said, the line play was pretty bad offensively for both teams. There were 18 total tackles for a loss in this game. That is bizarre, right? Two pretty good defenses. Don't get me wrong, but I thought that the O lines just played terrible. Not a whole
Like,
lot to talk about in this game. I think the offense just kind of didn't show up for either team. Defenses played pretty well, and ultimately, I think that the healthier team won. I don't want to say the better team. I do think that Ohio State overall is probably a better team, but Missouri has the playmakers in the right place to get the job done, and that's what they proved to me is that they can go out there and with a few guys that are better than Ohio State's best guys who were playing in this game, and get the job done and win the game. So I think that Missouri is a real threat moving forward. They've got a pretty good class coming in. I got to think that now after this game they're going to be looking harder in the transfer portal to spend some of that NIL money that they ended up not having to spend on the receiver whose name is escaping me right now that they lost out on, Ryan Wingo, I believe. So you've got to think that they've got some opportunities to go out and get transfer portal players to bolster this team, hopefully on the lines of scrimmage to help give them an opportunity to win some games next season. I think Brady Cook is probably gone. I don't know if he has any eligibility left, but they've got a quarterback in Horn behind him who's apparently ready to play, right now.
mm-hmm.
And Missouri is going to be one of those fringe playoff teams next year too, and I'm excited to see it.
Yeah, it's going to depend a lot on the schedule and how who you're playing in back-to-back weeks and things like that. SEC schedules are obviously all changing up. There's not going to be any East and West anymore, so it's a little harder to you know we're as SEC people, we in our heads, we're like, all right, they're in the West, they play this team. They're in the East, they play these teams. You can't do that no more. So we'll have to go in this offseason and do a temperature check on both of these programs, and we'll definitely do that. Make sure you're subscribed and checking in with the First and Long College Football Show, and we'll keep you up to date on all that stuff throughout the offseason. Let's kind of talk about the Peach Bowl for just a minute. And I literally mean just a minute because I don't think there was much to talk about here. This game started out slow as well, especially for Ole Miss on offense, and then they really started piling on. And I mean, they threw the kitchen sink at them too. I mean, there
They
was
did.
trick plays and all kinds of stuff. I mean, Kiffin was in his bag. So, and we just saw more of Penn State having trouble doing what they've had trouble doing all year. Is getting the ball down the field, air it out. They can't do it. They're just they can. They just I don't know. There's something there, dude. They don't look good throwing the ball long. Um, they're I won't put them down to a level of Iowa. Oh my God, how horrible were the wide receivers in that Iowa game yesterday? We can
Yeah,
talk
I
about
saw
that
it.
one in a minute, just for a laugh, anyway. But um, it there's no downfield threats. The coaching staff doesn't trust Drew Aller to throw the ball down the field,
Mhm.
obviously. Um, it's kind of just back to the drawing board. I mean, this is a good running attack. This is a good front seven on this defense. The secondary seemed confused for Penn State. Um, all in all, Ole Miss was just a better ball club in this one to me.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that they played kind of within their own game plan a lot better. And you know, they did throw the kitchen sink at Penn State, but that's kind of what Ole Miss is. It's kind of what Lane Kiffin's offense is a lot of creativity. Doesn't always work, but it did in this game, you know, for the most part. I can't recall any trick plays. I didn't get to watch this one from start to finish. I did a blind reaction on this one, so I got to see the highlighted plays, but you know, it seemed like Ole Miss kind of played within themselves better. Penn State towards the end, and I know you said that they didn't really air the ball out. I mean, Drew Aller threw the ball 39 times. You know, Katron Allen had 10 carries. Nicholas Singleton had 8 carries. You know, they only ran the ball 28 times overall. And a large part of that is because Ole Miss is a pretty good run stopping defense.
Right.
They're not a great defense overall. Run stopping though, they've been pretty solid. And they're only going to get better next year. But I thought that Penn State had to kind of change their game plan up on offense a little bit, and they weren't able to do it.
When they got down, they had to throw. I mean, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And they weren't able to do it. You know, it was. I thought that if there was a game to go out there and try to pass the ball downfield more, and see what you got in Drew Aller, this was a game to do it. You don't just like show up to this game. You know, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but you know, this is the game where you throw everything out there because there's not another game after this with this team, this exact team. So, you know, I would have liked to have seen more of that from start to finish. But you know, Drew Aller does end up just a little bit over 50%, which is not good. But he does have 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. You know, I think Penn State was lacking on defense a little bit as well. You know, no Chop Robinson. I think that was a huge impact on defense. And no, what is it, Shafanu, their left tackle. You know, he was out as well, so that had a little bit to do with it. But yeah, I think we saw more of the same out of Penn State. I'm not really sure why they were favored in the beginning, because their offense proved to be pretty futile to. And pretty much non-existent in my opinion, and it showed in this game.
It was a bad matchup for Penn State. You know, like you said, the strength of this Ole Miss defense is stopping the run, and the weakness is a porous back end, and Penn State just couldn't take advantage of it, and that's where you get this 38-25 final here. Let's jump in the Orange Bowl. Yikes! UGA absolutely bitch slaps Florida State.
FSU got TCU, didn't they?
They got TCU'd, bro. They got TCU'd pretty bad. They got horny frogged. Man. All right, where to begin with this one? So everybody knows the falling apart that has happened for Florida State. I mean, this team, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it really is wild. This team went undefeated, won a conference championship, and the team just absolutely fell apart because they didn't make the playoff. Yeah. And a lot of players sat out. I know that's true, but it doesn't matter, dude. You can't get beat by 60 in this game, man. That is, look, the playoff committee is going to remember this forever. They're always going to remember this, and they're always going to think about it. And if it comes down to Florida State or a Missouri or something next year getting in a 12-team playoff, they're going to go with Missouri, dude.
Right.
This accentuated everybody's thoughts about Florida State already. And we were on this show right here, we were beating the drum of they deserve to be in the playoff. And I still stand by that. I don't want a room full of people telling me that an undefeated team ain't good enough because they said so. I don't like that. But that doesn't make it inaccurate, right? They're not one of the best 4 teams. Georgia probably is one of the best 4 teams. And we saw what the difference was in that. And it was about 60 points. It could have been a lot more than that, Mason. This thing could have been 103-3.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What's your thoughts?
It could have definitely gotten out of hand. I it to me, I don't want to put too much on Florida State. I think that they were so, you know, broken as a team, emotionally, um, from not being selected after having a perfect season. You think that's what you have to do to make the playoffs, and they were left out. They were the ones on the outside looking in, and it's very unfortunate. I I don't necessarily have any sort of affinity towards Florida State, but I still will beat the drum that they should have been in,
Mhm.
and had they been in, I'm not convinced that, with a full team and buy-in from the team and the undefeated season and all that momentum going into a playoff game, that they don't end up having a better performance than what Alabama just had against Michigan. Uh,
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that they wouldn't, with the playmakers, with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, playing, and Rodemaker would have been playing in this game, instead of Brock
I think
Lynn.
Florida State and Alabama are very comparable. I know the
Yeah.
talent levels are not exactly the same, but I'm just saying their styles and everything statistically, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. And there's no way to disprove what you're saying. And
Yeah.
that's my whole point. And there's no way to prove that they weren't one of the four best other than pointing to something like this. But this was, I mean, Florida State was a shell of their former selves.
Yeah. And I think you saw kind of almost a boycott, from the players in Florida State. I
Hmm.
think that it was really just them saying, you know what, if it's all about TV ratings, then you're not going to get it off of us. So they kind of just collapsed, and crumbled like a dry cookie. I mean, it just seemed like they fell apart in college football's hands. And
Hmm.
um, cue the violin. I mean, it was pretty bad. Um, on the flip side, Georgia looked outstanding. Um, I think that the way that they played, it seemed to me like they would have done this to anybody on this day. It's kind of like TCU. I mean, a similar type of game, but like it didn't feel like it was just the opponent that was that bad. Like Georgia
Yeah.
just they really did look really good. There were some plays where Florida State was I mean they were covering our guys, and Dylan Bell specifically had a couple of really contested passes that I thought there's no way, as the ball is flying his way, there's no way he catches this, and he comes down with it. So credit Georgia for finally winning some contested ball, winning or being on the winning side of a contested ball, and you know, playing really well. I thought that they needed a bounce back after the SEC championship game, where they clearly played their worst game of the season, when it mattered most. And so
Yeah.
they needed that momentum as well. Even though they're a championship caliber team, you got to build some momentum wherever you can. And it came to to the um, well, it's unfortunate for Florida State, but they were kind of standing in the way of Georgia and them getting back into that momentum, the positive momentum swing.
Well, and I think this kind of sheds a light on these two programs and the differences that there are in these two programs, because Georgia got their heart broken just like Florida State did.
Hmm.
Lost by what the committee said is one of the four best teams in the country by 3 points. Only game they've lost in 2 years. And they lose by 3 points on a day where they had a bad day, and then all of a sudden they're just completely out of the running. Um, but you add a guy like Kirby Smart and some real serious locker room leaders, and I think Florida State is missing that, man. They don't have a player-led team at Florida State, obviously. This was Mike Norvell trying to hold this thing together with Elmers and Tate, and I mean, he was fighting a losing battle the whole time, and he had to go out there and wear that ass whooping, and he did, and the rest is history, 63-3, man. And that's going to go down as the biggest thrashing in a bowl game ever. So this was historic proportions of a beatdown right here. And UGA, I think, is going to be better for it. considering they were able to rally the troops and get everybody to play in this game. I thought that was very impressive and a good showing by the leadership. Kirby had the easiest job in the world on Saturday.
Mhm.
I mean, I was worried when the game started. I saw Kirby coming out and the way he was talking. First of all, he seemed kind of heartbroken. That Georgia's not where, obviously he wanted to be, but his calm demeanor and stoicism was based on the fact that he knew what was about to happen, dude.
Yeah.
He knew these players had everybody fired up and ready to go. They had some good practices and things. So I think you kind of see the stark differences between a team that's built in the transfer portal and you got a bunch of guys just from all over the place that you throw together on a roster. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the leadership that you need to go win a championship. And Florida State lacked that very, very clearly. Let's you want to dive into some of the just kind of our initial thoughts on this college football playoff championship game in Houston. That's going to be at
Absolutely.
7:30 p.m. Eastern time, Washington versus Michigan. That's going to be on Monday. Michigan is currently a 4.5-point favorite, big spread, over under 55.5. Let's man, styles make fights, and we've got two totally different types of styles in this game. I mean, you couldn't have two teams farther apart from each other on the spectrum. You've got the number one passing offense in the country in Washington. I would say a historic wide receiver core as far as college football is concerned, and then you've got just a well-rounded team altogether in Michigan, and possibly a really good offense. They looked really good this past weekend.
I
Um,
agree.
so what say you? I mean, what gives here? I don't know. I really don't know how to read this thing yet.
I think the biggest takeaway that I have from the college football semifinals in regards to the college football championship game is that I think that Michigan's going to have to win this one in a different manner. I don't think that their defense wins this game for them. I don't see that being possible unless they are able to rush the quarterback, which is something that no team has been able to do against Washington. Now, I also don't think that Washington has faced a defense anywhere close, really close to what Michigan has done. You could argue Texas. Texas does not cover as well as Michigan does. But if you've got the best receiving core in college football, does that really matter? Can anybody cover these guys? Could Georgia's defensive backs cover these guys? And I don't know. I don't know that they could. I don't know if you could play man against Washington. That doesn't seem like a very winning type of game plan. So to me, you mentioned styles. I think that when you look at the matchups here, it's very similar to what we saw with Texas, where if you're matching up Washington versus Michigan, I do think that Washington's offense has the edge. So to me, the question comes: if you're Michigan, can you offensively beat Washington's defense? I do think that Michigan offensively is a little bit better than Washington's defense, but is it that much better than Washington's offense is over Michigan's defense? I don't know. But I don't think that Michigan wins this game on defense, and I think that they're going to have to win it in a different way than they have, in previous games this season. So to me, that's kind of the biggest question: is can JJ McCarthy win them this game? Whereas before, he's just been in charge of not losing it.
Yeah, and we saw multiple situations where he answered the bell in this past Rose Bowl game. So yeah, we're kind of left with a small sample size, but more of a sample size than what we had before. And he answered the bell. Can he do it again? We're gonna see there. I think you're exactly right. This Michigan team is going to have to score points in this game to keep up with Washington. I don't think anybody's holding Washington under 21 points at this point. I mean, that's just not that. I think you're asking way too much of your defense. So, with that being said, I think first 1 to 30 in this game wins.
Yeah.
I think that's where we're at. And we've seen in years past, like the LSU run to the title. That was not the best defense in the country. They were timely. They made timely stops. They got turnovers whenever they needed to, a lot like this Washington defense. And then they had an amazing offense. And we saw there was nobody that could stop them. Now, LSU was more dominant in that run in 2019 than what we've seen out of Washington, but the passing game, I mean, this is a better passing attack than what LSU was. I think LSU had a better run game that year if we're, comparing those two teams. But my point is, when you've got a guy like Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, McMillan, those are game breakers. And there's only so many of those to go around. And I think Michigan has a game breaker in Roman Wilson, but I just don't know that it's going to be enough to answer strike for strike against this Washington offense that's so potent. Now, we talked about Dylan Johnson being hurt. I think that definitely hurts things. That definitely changes some things. We just saw Alabama ran the ball pretty successfully on Michigan. 187 yards, I think, is what it was they had on the ground. Pretty solid. Jace McClellan had a nice day. So you're going to need somebody to step up in that regard. And we saw Penix take a little bit of the pressure off of the offense with his feet whenever he needed to. Saw that a ton at Indiana when he was there. Ever since he's went through his injury spell and before the transfer and everything, he's very reluctant to get hit. He slides almost immediately when he runs, but his legs work. He can make it happen, and he's going to have to do that, just like JJ McCarthy's going to have to do that in this game. I think. This is a timely Washington defense. We'll see what they can do against an offensive line that is just they're gonna lay on them, dude. So
Yeah.
that's what's gonna happen. They're gonna lean and lean and lean and hopefully get you to get tuckered out there at the end of the game, and we'll see how that works with a Washington defense that I don't think is crazy deep either. So I think that's another concern. I think Michigan definitely answers the bell as far as their depth is concerned. 55 and a half on that over under. I'm gonna have to look at that one more, but I feel like there's gonna need to be more scoring than that in this game, and I think I could see more like 60 in this one. Neither one of these teams was real good on third down in these bowl games either. So that's gonna have to be Washington's gonna have to be better on third down if they're gonna want to beat Michigan, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and you know, overall, I do think that this is going to be a higher scoring game, a game that's played in the 30s. High 20s, low 30s, that kind of deal. I do kind of like the over as a knee jerk reaction, but I'm looking forward to kind of getting after this a little bit and figuring out, really how we see it playing out. I think that, come I don't know when our next show is going to be, but if we do a show on Sunday, whenever we do this breakdown, I'm anxious to see kind of what it looks like.
Yeah. Well, and we hope that you are all here to take it all in with us and break down the January 8th national championship game. It's going to be a dang good one there in Houston. Thank you all so much for watching today. We have certainly enjoyed this season, and we owe you all a big thank you because we're closing in on 500 subscribers, and we just could not have imagined doing as much traffic as the channel's done this year, and that's all and thanks to you guys and all the great college football fans that we get to come into contact with doing this show week in and week out, and the party keeps going. We're not folding up shop here till next year or anything like that. We've got tons of content coming your way, and we hope that you'll subscribe and come join us. Later this week, we will be breaking down the national championship game and all other college football news. We hope that you will join us. Drop us a comment in the comment section and let us know if we missed anything today and what your thoughts were on the game. And until later this week, this is Marcus and that's Mason signing out for the First and Long College Football Show. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks. Take care.